record button. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Bill Cope, and it's my great pleasure today to be able to introduce Birger Sevalson, who's written this quite remarkable book. I'm looking through it earlier. It's obviously a lot of accumulated experience in here, a lot of deep knowledge, and it's a big book and it's been a lot of work. So before we even start, I'd like to say what an amazing feat this is. So I'm going to mention a little bit first about Common Ground and what we do, introduce myself a little bit, and then after that, I'm going to hand over to our author, who's going to give us a presentation on the work that he's done in the book that he's just written. So look, I'm Bill Cope. I'm one of the founders of Common Ground. We've been at this for quite a long time now, actually, and this Constructed Environment Conference and the Construction Environment Research Network has been around for, I should know this off the top of my head, but it must be 15 years or so now, actually. So we deliberately have this idea of constructed environment, which is, the word environment is, implies all sorts of things which are natural and organic. But in fact, what we do as human beings, we live in that environment and we are perpetually constructing things. And even the natural environment becomes constructed in our imaginations and in our practices as well. So these things are heavily linked. So we want to try and capture that, all the nuances and ambiguities of that particular, this particular phrase in this research network. And what the research network does, one, it produces books, of which this is a marvelous example, which it's my great honor to launch today and introduce our author. We have a journal as well, and we have an annual conference. Unfortunately, we were interrupted by COVID for a couple of years, but we managed to keep going as an online conference in that time. But now we've gone back to being a blended conference, and this year's conference is held in person at the University of Hawaii. So some of the people I know who are here are at the conference in person. Some of them are online presenters and participants in the conference. And just to say something about this notion of a research network is one where we want to build a kind of a knowledge community. So there's a lot of interaction that goes on, a lot of peer reviewing of manuscripts when they're submitted in the case of books, peer reviewing of journal articles, but also now with the blended conference, we have this environment where there can be a lot of dialogue around the presentations that people give, whether they're in person or remote. So we encourage people to put in electronic media. So it's very much about building a knowledge community. And one of the most important parts of building a community like this is to leave a kind of a trace, to publish stuff for people's ideas, both to be shared, reviewed by peers, but also shared amongst the members of the community. So it was my great pleasure now to introduce Birger Sevalson. And what I'd like you to do, Birger, I know you're going to give a presentation, so I'll hand over the sharing to you just now, but also tell a little bit at the beginning, perhaps, about your own story, your own journey as a person who's thought very long and hard about these questions of design and complexity and put these two difficult ideas together. So rather than me introduce you, I'm going to ask you to give a little potted biography of yourself at the beginning, just so we get a bit of a context. Go mute all. Oh, there we go. That's good. Okay, so look, I'm going to now stop sharing my screen. I'm going to make you the co-host. Now, so let me just try and find you in this long list. Can't see you. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make you the co-host, and you will now be able to share your screen. So welcome, wonderful to have you here and wonderful to have the audience. And by the way, I want to just welcome not just the audience that's here online now, but also there'll be a considerable audience who watch the recording later on asynchronously as well. So anyhow, over to you for your presentation, Birger.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation to talk about my book. And also, I'm very happy to be that my book was published with CGN, and it has been a long process and but a very pleasant one. So I'm very happy to be here today. Everybody hears me well, I hope. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, very well, thanks. Yeah.
Tell you a little bit. I'm talking to you from what should be approximately exactly the opposite of the world. It's like the time difference is exactly 12 hours. So I'm sitting in Oslo in Norway, and I'm talking to you. It's here is a nice evening, sun is shining. My background is I'm an educated interior architect and furniture designer a long time ago in arts and crafts school, and I worked a bit with experimental architecture in an international group called Ocean. There were a lot of architects and a lot of digital architecture and design, and in that work always coping with complexity was at the bottom of it. Sort of the foundation was to try to work with complex issues and not with singular and framed answers to problems that we are investigating. I did my PhD in 2005 on mathematics of working creatively with computers. And after that, I just found, rediscovered, I have to show it to you, just this document, which it doesn't focus very well, but it's my first master's levels course I had, which was called Systems Thinking and Complexity in 2006. And from that, we started to work, me and together with some colleagues, trying to investigate this topic of complexity in design. I found that very important. It gave a sense of importance and urgency that we needed to deal with, become better to deal with complexity. And before I knew it, I had waded into this vast world of theories, which might be called systems thinking at large, which contains a whole lot of different theories. Also, some of them are in opposition, but and different waves, like from hard to soft, etc. And it was I had to really start to read that. I connected with some people, and there was this, or still is, this PhD in design email list, where I found some friends who were sort of interested in the same topic, because people had tried this earlier. The design field has been populated with a handful of great systems thinkers, like Horst Rittel, who coined this term of wicked problems, and yeah, like people like Russ Acuff, he was actually studied architecture. So there were systems thinkers said before, but systems approaches never made it really as one of the main ideas or approaches in design, mainly because I think it was too cumbersome to apply those orthodoxies or systems modeling, quite strict methodologies into design. It was disruptive for designing. So we wanted to find a designerly way to work with systems. It had to be integrated totally in a way. And we found that designing was very well suited for understanding systems. So I'm going to share a bit of my presentation now. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, just cleaning up a little bit here. Okay. So, and through this work, well, everything we do is our, I mean, everything we are surrounded with are, in a certain sense, artifacts. Even nature today is becoming to increasingly degree artifacts. Even war is an artifact, so to say. Just try to take the next slide. I don't know how it is in Hawaii. I think you are very far from what's happening in Europe. Well, I don't think everybody here today are in Hawaii, but it comes very close to us here. What's happening, and war is sort of an artifact, and you can say it's designed in a way. And you find also a small discussion in the book about this design artifact. It's the 1936 Nuremberg Nazi convent with the biggest light installation ever made. It's called the Cathedral of Light, and this huge altar designed by Albert Speer, Peter's architect, and this huge crowd. I think there were 150,000 people there, and I think nobody can really say that they wouldn't be sort of affected by this if they were there. Which to me is like, design is very powerful, and it's very powerful when misused, but it can also be powerful when used with the right ethics. I don't know if you know, I think all of us are aware of now this kind of downfall, or the downward spiral of the democracies in the world. It's really disturbing. Sorry, just mute the guy here. Yeah, so yeah, I've been following this for many years, and looked into democracy as an issue. And if you know this, if not, you just should look into this VDEM, Variations of Democracy. If you search on the net, it's international group. It looks right in the spirit of the CVM. It's it has a headquarter in Gothenburg in Sweden, and cells all over the planet in most countries, reporting back to make this very thought through reports on democracy. So they have more than, I think they have more than 400 indicators when they measure the development of democracy, which was an eye-opener for me. So democracy has then been a field of interest, and stating that democracy is an artifact. It can be designed. It is designed, and it can be designed differently. So this is from my webpage, or our webpage, systemsorienteddesign.net. So I'm going to say a little bit more about what systems-oriented design is, and then towards the end, this speech now, there's an echo. Somebody turn off. Everybody turn off their microphones. Okay. So towards the end of this presentation, I will go more concrete into the content of the book. So systems-oriented design, it's a variation of systemic design, or like systemic design is the bigger garden, a pluralistic garden with many different plants, and systems-oriented design is one plant in that garden. So what has emerged in the last, since let's say 2012, when we had the first Realistic System Thinking and Design conference, is that more and more dialogue has appeared, but also The pluralism in the field has developed, and people are seeking many different ways forward to understand how to combine or merge systems thinking and design. Harold Nelson, who wrote the foreword of the book, he claims in his book, The Design Way, that systemics is the nature of design. And that's true in a way, but at the same time, I am brought up in a Bauhaus tradition, sort of. So we didn't think a lot about systems or about second order or third order kickbacks from what we did. So this conference is every October every year, so you could look into it, and yeah, it's highly interesting and super engaging. So if you imagine this kind of field of tensions between design practice and design thinking, and systems thinking and systems practice, and if you accept that kind of diagram, you could imagine that systems-oriented design is off-center towards practice. Please mute your microphones. Okay. So this probably is a sort of a position which I will talk more about, that we are very oriented towards praxis, though we have some theory in the backing. What is characteristic of systems-oriented design, that we have adopted this kind of multi-perspective and methodological pluralism, inspired from some systems theorists, people like Midgley, which means that there is not one viewpoint, perspective, or story or narrative that is sufficient. You have to find several ways of looking at things, maybe empathic or distanced, or maybe looking at the large picture, or looking at from bottom up at from the viewpoint of the affected bystanders. We can call those people who were not actually who don't have a stake in the system we're trying to change, but they are still affected. And the same with understanding the boundaries of systems. We think of them as constructs, not necessarily given, and that they are given from the perspective of the stakeholders, and that they are changing over time. So if you think of the system as the entity you work with, you have the environment, which very simplified can say that it's the first order interaction with the environment, and then you have the landscape, where there are more than two links for an interaction, and then you have the bigger world and the universe around. We are exploring those boundaries as far as we can to understand as much as possible, and beyond what we think is relevant in the start, to understand better what we are working with. As an example, think of everything as being super complex. And this little paper cup here has become almost an icon. I tried to find the most simple and stupid, innocent object that I could find, and started to rethink it and re-explore it. And it turns out that it's like an intersection point of many very, very complex systems that meet in that simple artifact. And one of them, for example, being a lady somewhere picking coffee. It's definitely not in Norway. Norway doesn't grow its own coffee, so we have to import everything, though we are drinking a lot of it. And somebody is actually picking this coffee somewhere. And there's immediately an issue of engagement and empathy in that, just that thought. And via very complex marketing, raw material, stock markets, transportation systems, etc., this coffee ends in my cup. The other system might be somebody cutting a tree in the forest somewhere, maybe in Finland. And again, through very complex processes, this becomes a paper cup. And then you have the issues of economy and branding, etc., water infrastructure, etc., which we mentioned a lot here. Please turn off your microphones. Are you kind? It's very disturbing. Yeah, so and then one could ask, what is the political, or is there a political dimension to that little silly paper cut? And I think there are quite a few you can think of. At least one that is quite obvious is the whole idea of fair trade and how the whole global marketing system is rigged and who benefits the most from it, etc. So this is interpretation of the coffee cup from one of my students. And that's the complexity that was unveiled from this little simple object. So what happens when you do this? There are several things. Well, the first thing is that this paper cup isn't that boring anymore. It's more interesting. It has a lot of to it that one could dive into as a starting point. The other thing is that understanding the whole system, it opens up for creativity, for going elsewhere than looking at the paper cup, to maybe find other places in the big system where one could do some good work. The main tool for doing this kind of work, well, probably this is a GigaMap. The GigaMapping is the main tool we use. We have some other tools too, but I won't mention them today. But this is the most important one, and it's a nice tool in the sense that there's nothing that is wrong. You just can do it. It can just be better or worse, and it has a very low threshold. But you can climb a high hill by training and developing it. So GigaMaps are extensive, multi-scholar, mixed, inclusive, genre-bending, unorthodox, creative, messy, myriadic visualizations of fields. Can you please mute your microphones? Thank you. Okay, once more. GigaMaps are extensive, multi-scholar, mixed, inclusive, genre-breaking, unorthodox, creative, messy, myriadic visualizations of fields, problems, issues, subjects, environments, things, and social constructs in the world. So I think maybe this explains already that there is, it's a very open and very inclusive way of thinking and way of mapping. And the whole point is that you should interconnect, find connections, or even create connections between things. And the relations are central here. I'm going to show you some examples here. This is a comparative GigaMap where two people were mapping together from each side of the map and trying to analyze two businesses that were quite different, but still revealed to have a lot of similarities. This one is a GigaMap that's made in India, in Ahmedabad at the National Institute of Design, who has quite a vivid environment for systemic design. And this is about traveling or commuting or waiting in India. You can imagine the complexity of that. Another example can look like that, this is from Chalmers University, it's Institute of Architecture, and it's quite rough, and there are several maps and documents, even texts, and there are some tables there too. So it sort of says how you can connect things across different maps. And this one. William, could you please help me with muting people? Oh, it's weird. There's some.
No, I'm sorry about this. I'm muting people as they come in. So
Yeah, yeah. There's some. I never experienced that much of this before, so it's some weird stuff going on there. Maybe the lecture is boring, so people are talking about other stuff. But that's fine. I don't mind. Okay, so this one is also from India, and it's not really a generative map in the sense that it doesn't create new solutions or interventions in systems, but it describes just a notion, the notion of empathy. And I found this super interesting because in design, empathy has become central after design thinking made its way into the world via IDEO and Stanford D School with those 5 simplified points where empathize is the first one. But very few people I know of at least have been talking about what exactly is empathy. And of course, empathy is similar to design. It's a theme. It's not something you can capture in one definition, but it's both genetic, cultural, and a practice. It's biological, etc., psychological, etc. So it has a lot of aspects and ways of understanding it. So gigamaps should mix and interrelate all kinds of information and different modes of presentation of data, info, and knowledge. The mixing and relating of different channels and ways of representing info is crucial. So this is a bit of, if you think of case study research, according to Robert Yin, who introduced this idea of triangulating information. So you should have, almost like a journalist, you should have several sources and they should not be of the same nature, but they could be of different nature. Some of them could be maybe somebody you talk to, it could be desktop research, or it could be statistics. And all these different sources of information you can bring together and relate in the gigamap so that they're not stand singular and fragmented, but they sort of create a bigger picture together. So this is not a method. It's a methodology, but it's a methodology without the methods. Methods are prescriptions. If you follow the prescription, you would get a similar or at least a good result. So we're thinking of it that a methodology is sort of the dialogue about methods, about how you do things. So we think of this as a practice or praxeology that we're training, and training systemic design and system thinking as a skill is central. So we'll focus on skill and competence building rather than following particular rule-driven processes. And in those skills that are quite central are visual thinking, wicked problems, sensibility for systems, and tacit knowledge, and sense sharing. The gigamap intends to lift the attention from the entities to the relations. This is sort of, I think it comes from Harold Nelson, that if you want to become a systems thinker, you need to change your attention from the entities to the relations. And we have worked a lot with making this sort of library of systemic relations, which is you see to the left. And if you look at the map, most of the relations are color-coded. Some of the arrows have different fonts, and there are also some tags, which says what is the relation. While the objects are sort of dimmed down, so they're not taking too much of an attention. Still with this map, which was quite a much long work about urban habitat or urban ecology, there are a lot of black relations which didn't fit into the library we constructed. The library is available on the net, so you can look at it. Another example, this is a very early map of a student made for his master's thesis about oil spill. There was a ship accident outside the coast of here, and there was a big mess with cleaning it up. And as a good design student, like all design students think they want to make a better skimmer or cleaning equipment. But after he tried to understand the whole system around it, he changed his attention to the prevention of oil accidents by designing sort of a risk forecast system that involved all actors of the coast, being different sectors, trying to bind them together, but also even included fishermen and leisure boat people in that network. Such a network partly exists in Denmark today. Another example is this quite new map, which came from a systems engineering student I taught in Kongsberg. He made this map to become onboarded in his new job at Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace. And I think it's a wonderful example how you can think about processes also as very complex objects or artifacts, an onboarding process. And I think he got a head start and got up and running very, very fast. And the company is contemplating how to do this as an established way of onboarding new people. So GigaMaps are not replacing any other ways you have been working until now. You can still do your service blueprints, and you can do your causal loop models or your mind mapping. But all of those things are not really including all of them are sort of narrow in their nature. So you have to do more than just one thing, and the GigaMap helps you to bring it all together. And even more, that this is when some of my colleagues and students started to violate this diagram, and they started to add a lot of cool stuff to it. So think of it as free space where you can bring all kinds of information and draw lines and relations between it. For example, this is an example where I try to map out a Norwegian housing system. And I would not do that with a hand-drawn freestyle GigaMap. So this is done with a modeling method from System Dynamics. It's a simplification and adaptation. You have those little plus and minus relations, which means that a plus relation or a positive relation is a unbalanced relation, which means if one element increases, the other one will increase too, or the opposite. So if you have a loop of relations where all relations will increase on the way from one to the other, you will have a spiral that will spiral out of control until something catastrophic happens, or a downward spiral. So you need some balanced relations that are sort of, if one increases, the other decreases. This is a way of looking at the housing system that is very cool and for me very giving, but it's alone, it doesn't say everything about housing. So this project is also about housing. This is the title page of my book, and I don't understand much of that GigaMap, but it's about housing, it's about gentrification. So systems do not only consist of, let me just move this around here. Well, you can read it. It doesn't, the whole point is that it doesn't consist of only material, stock and flows cause and effect relations, and energy exchange. All systems are subject to interpretation. We might consider the boundaries of the system, including associations, symbols, emotions, narratives, beliefs, cultures, and power structures. Often those immaterial things are more important and maybe even material force. Just some other, you see the contrast. So what's in the book? In the book, you find some lamps, you find a Harley Davidson bike, you find the Suleiman Mosque in Istanbul, you find the Escher print called Relativity, you find the tea ceremony, etc. All these are hopefully making this an interesting read. So the build-up is 3 parts: a short introduction, which should make you running. Then there is a part about theories, and the third part is about, the biggest part is about praxis. So writing about complexity, I'm just checking the time that it doesn't just run away. I will try to be a little bit fast, speed up a bit. So it has been quite a task to write about this book, because it was a complex task in itself. There were no straight answers. So it's more like weaving a carpet. So how would you read the book? There's a chapter, it doesn't say introduction, but it says read this first, because I think it's a good idea to read this instruction, how to read the book first, and then you can choose after that. If you are interested in only to start practicing as soon as possible, you can read part 1. If you are a theory-minded person, you can read part 2. And diving into praxis, read part 3. Well, I think I don't need to go into the details. You can just look up the content of the book, and well, the basics ends up with an example. This is a design project which became quite famous in Norway. It's the emergency hospital for sexual assaults in Oslo, and they redesigned this whole gave me the design proposal to redesign how that actually worked. Part 2 is about the theories, and that's quite challenging, because design is like a boiling pot where things are migrating and immigrating, and new specialities are emerging, and new interdisciplines and transdisciplinary working models are coming. So it's kind of hard to catch that moving target. Here you also find the sources, both from the theories, the philosophies, the practices, etc., that have inspired systems-oriented design. And the third part is about praxeology. And what is praxeology? In Norway, we do a lot of ski jumping. I think there's not so much in Hawaii. But since that's a national sport, we have an institute for sports, or that investigates and researches ski jumping. And they use wind tunnels and video analysis, etc., and then write those big reports. So you can read all those reports, and you can go on the top of the ski jump and jump. That would kill you probably, because you haven't done your practice. You haven't started with a small jump and worked your way upwards. You can ski jump without the theories, but you cannot ski jump with only the theories, but you can ski jump better with the theories. So the theories are underpinning the praxeology. The praxeology is all those tacit knowledge, just the craft, the skills, and how they are made explicit. So training, tacit knowledge, developing skills, competence, experiences, and intuition in them. I like this diagram, which was made by one of my students. Like information visualization normally is about simplifying information so that it's understandable, easy understandable for many people. This is not what we're doing. We are more like this tunneling, not the funneling, but the tunnel. And we take this mess and try to reorganize it in a way that it makes it accessible. So we construct this image. It's a construction. It's not a model. It's not a photo of reality, but it's a construction of our understanding and interpretation of the reality. So how to start? Just jump into it and dive in and have fun. Now, this is my last slide. This is the book site on the web page, where there is some more information, and it also leads you to the where you can order the book on the CDM web page. Thank you very much. I think I can stop.
Thank you very, very much. And look, we've got some time for some questions now. And I can see some people have put some really excellent questions in the chat. So I wonder, I can see just looking back, we've got questions, some comments actually from Margaret Walkover and Francisco Gali and several others as well. Would either of you, Margaret or Francisco or any of the others, like to put up your hand and speak to them orally, or would you like me to read them out? I can do either of those things. Be nice to hear from you orally if you'd like to, just if one of you just would pop up your hand and we'll get you to speak. Either of you? Francisco.
I never have problem to talk in front of the people, but probably it's better to Margaret start first.
Okay.
If you want.
Sure.
Margaret, over to you, Margaret.
Okay. Hi from Hawaii.
Hey.
So my chat thought is that we're going back to the paper cup. And I'm thinking of Thich Nhat Hanh, who actually also uses this in Tibetan Buddhist idea of how nature and the social are related.
What's that?
So with understanding complexity is basically knowing that everything's interrelated, which is a very old concept, not just a modern systems concept.
Yeah.
So complexity thinking explains the paper cup in this way, that the cup and its contents is actually emergent. It's emerging from a dynamic network of processes. The cup itself is a process that is momentarily slowed down enough to be experienced as an object. And so part of what, if we could be in the same room and we could have some time to talk, part of what I would want to ask is about, Birger, is your experience with understanding the recursive nature of processes or objects that emerge from any kind of design, from natural processes that end up with something that's concrete enough to be experienced by living beings, and understanding these objects or processes as always being in a state of change. So I'm just wondering where I'm understanding that the way that you seem to experience complexity is from a linear place to try and the priority is to try and help us understand the that which can be seen as a structure, so we can make sense of it, so we can see the order in the complexity. And I'm wondering how you also understand the constant dynamism of that which is design.
Yes,
And the designers that design it.
Yeah, first of all, where to start? I think you're perfectly right that I mean, the mountain is slowly falling down, and we only perceive it as static because it goes so slowly. I wouldn't say that we are searching for order. We're trying to make sense. I think that's slightly it's not exactly the same thing. We're trying to find interpretations and hope to find interventions and actions that have fewer counterintuitive kickbacks than we normally experience. Like we try to do good, but far too often we trigger something, a new problem elsewhere, or something unexpected happens. So our ambitions, I say, if we can do it 10% better, I'm very happy. I think we are probably doing a little bit more than that, but I think you need to be very humble about what to really achieve. We're not searching for order in the system. We are more sort of learning to tolerate the mess in a way, and to try to dance with the system. Like also, I mean, you mentioned also the dynamic nature of the world. The dynamic thing, which of course is not so very well touched by the. I don't know if I think there was more depth in your.
Well, in the, you know, I found out since becoming a graduate student at an older age, after a life of being developed in social complexity in the public health system, I found that there are generations of people across all fields, across time, in terms also modernity and also in the past, who have asked this very question: is how can we understand and manage the complexity of who we are and what we generate? How can we do it in a way? There's a whole group of people who I just want to assure everyone, and it's good to go find these folks who have looked at the complexity as not to the perspective on this generative, dynamic social and physical world is not to try and minimize the unpredictable effects of what we do, because it's too dense. We really can't. We can. The GigaMap comes in handy. We can map the terrain and try and have relationships. It's all about relationships with the entities that we're working with to try and shape and influence what's going to happen. So the more engaged sort of way of looking at complexity is that the way we there's no solutions when we use the word solve. The way we solve it is by having real authentic relationships with the other subjects, not objects, but subjects that we're working with. The problems come in is when we assume that the system is mechanical and we can force or overlay a structured solution onto it that has some effects, but always has negative externalities, as they say in economics. So that's a shorthand version of the kind of discussion I'd want to have with people here.
Virgil, there are a couple of other comments here as well. And I just wonder whether some other people might like to join the discussion. We've got Krista Kaufman, who has a comment. Arno appears to have left and Francisco's still there. Would somebody else like to jump in on this conversation and add?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we can hear you well.
But more or less is also connected to the question that Margaret faced. No, you can read the question in the chat, and my question was how to lead today with power play, uncertainty. Because first of all, thanks so much, fantastic presentation. But today look like that this approach is really energetic. You know, coming back to the philosophy, energy is related to praxis. No, you visualize effect, you visualize connection. Dynamics, and I'm using dynamics also because Margaret used dynamics, is related to the movement, the evolution of the system, power play, corruption, contradiction, paradoxes are concepts that today in design are really important, especially for the young generation. That's why my question is, how do you think that this method of GigaMaps, of system map, can lead with power play and uncertainty? Thanks so much.
Imperfectly, but I think it's better than not. I think I would say there's a lot of people thinking about complexity and trying to sort out their mind and finding the right theories. But we come from the design side, and I think we're using our design skills to do that. We're trying. We have, I mean, one of the main thematics of the RSD conferences has exactly addressed this issue of power play and power dynamics. So we are addressing it as well as we can. We are not. We cannot say that we have very good answers or silver bullets. I don't think there is any silver bullets, but we are aware of it, and I'm teaching in an executive master for systems-oriented design, and we have a lot of, well, the organizational dynamics discussion is very up, like the Ralph Stacey line of thought, and so we're discussing a lot about these issues around on the level of the organizations, how they work.
Now, I'm just looking through other comments that we've had here. Arno appears to have gone, but I can read his question out, but also other people who can contributing. I see Sanhia had a question, Sanhia Ganas. Would somebody else like to jump in with a comment or a question?
Yeah.
Go for it. Frank.
May I join you and just about the uncertainty? What we are doing is problem solving with artistic processes for companies, international organizations, and so. And what you see behind me is...
Yeah, I saw it. I noticed. Nice.
Yeah, it has got a lot to do with what you are doing. And I'm really enthusiastic about what you have shown. It's really great. And thank you very much. And I like very much how you put that with this structure into your book. Just coming back to uncertainty, what we learned in our processes is that giving an overview, for example, if we have a project with a big company with 140 places in the world and they have to do a project together, there are lots of different opinions, lots of different aims, interests, lots of different cultures and professional languages. So there's a big uncertainty. And how can we do the project together? And what we do is that we do workshops or talking to people, we do live drawings and we put it into a space like you see here. And of course, there's a lot and it's a big complexity. But what is interesting is that even if we only can look at one point or one opinion, all the other opinions are there too. It's astonishing that people like that they have the show. Everyone has the show. Every one of the project, every stakeholder has his show or her show and can give his or her opinion, and we will put it into the space. On one hand, you are right. There's a big uncertainty there because there's so much and so much difference also. But what is interesting is to form a kind of, I have it here, a kind of red thread, a pattern in this very complex thing. And we can walk through this space with the images like in a visible brain, a common brain of all these people doing the project. And in 5 minutes, we can go through the red thread and people can create it and we can walk around and we get a lot. And I very much liked what you said about the relationships. And the thing is that the solutions for a problem are not coming from the elements or from the ideas, but it's between the ideas. It's relationship. It's the creation in between of different elements. And the thing, yes, please, excuse me.
I think one of the most important aspects of what we do is the process, the dialogue, that is the visual dialogue that helps people to, I think it's especially efficient in interdisciplinarity or different cultures trying to understand each other. Maybe there are bigger difficulties with different cultures, but at least in interdisciplinary settings, it's very, very efficient to understand, to get to the same page, to have jumping conversations, pointing and jumping from one point to the other, and still have the connection and avoid this kind of misunderstandings that are very, very common in
Now,
conversation.
look, we're running right near the end of our hour, and I can see that we have got one other person there with a who's got his hand up. Taki Shaheen, I might get you to make a very quick comment because we have another conference session coming up on the hour, which I can't
Yes,
prepare for already. So
absolutely.
would you like to
And
make a
also
comment?
some emailing here.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm from Karachi. So the presentation was very relevant and very interesting for us. But I just had a quick question regarding tunneling and funneling with regards to Praxeology. So I was curious that if you had any kind of cybernetic model in mind, like they were using black box, for example, Gregory Bateson and others during the 60s and 70s. So did you consider those aspects while you were putting this together? Thank you.
I have read some cybernetics and some system dynamics and some a little bit more soft systems methodology, but I must say I can't say I have I've dived deep into what you're mentioning, so I would be interested in doing that.
Okay, so look, I'm going to round the session off now. I want to thank everybody very much for being here. This is the book, and this is where you can get the book. If you're a member of the research network, let me just get the thing and set the chat here and pull it up. There it is. I can put the link in for you as well. If you're a member of the research network, it's available to everybody in the network as a PDF, but also there's a printed version of it as well. There's the link to it. Also, I want to just make everybody aware that in the research network, we have, this is the journal and all the books we've published to date. There's actually 541 pieces there. And if you use this advanced search button up here, it's quite an amazing resource. So we're trying to build a kind of a systematic bank of knowledge around this work. And these are the books that have been published so far. So this is all the stuff that's been published, journal articles, and we've published this many books. The latest is this wonderful Designing Complexity book. And just to finish off, this is the conference which is running at the moment. I think a lot of you in this group will be at the conference. A lot of people listening to the recording will be at the conference. So this is the pre-conference session. We're going to start the actual conference session in a moment. And if you go to the Advent microsite, you'll have the link for this next session, which starts in 1 minute. And lastly, what I want to do is I want to invite everybody to next year's conference, which is going to be at the University of Vienna. So look, thank you all for being here. And I particularly want to thank Birger for producing such an inspiring piece of work and for inspiring us today with the talk. And thank you everybody for that fabulous discussion that we were able to have as well. This session has been recorded and it'll be online in the conference site sometime soon, maybe later today. So, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and jump out, and I'll for those at the conference, I'll see you in the next session in seconds. Thank you, everybody. Bye then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.